Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is all about why so many teams will struggle with alignment, communication, and the delivery, even when everyone says that they are working in agile way. I'm Karajan Ilgar, founder of Founders, where we focus on practical tools, workflow improvement, and automation to help business more run more efficiently. And I'm glad to be joined today by Tuli Merchant. Tuli works in agile and team transformation space. She brings a real grounded perspective on what happens when companies adopt a language of agile without really building the leadership, thinking, and the system behind it. So today we're going to talk about what companies getting wrong about agile, what teams still breaks down, and how a remote leadership changes things, and where AI will actually help or hurt. So Tuli, really good to have you on today.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think it's a good place to start. Would actually be your story a little bit, right? So how did you decide to start this practical business? Remote Scrum study.
Well, I've been an Agile practitioner for 14 years, and Scrum Master for most of it, and I have multiple certifications. But as I was working for these large companies like Boeing and Microsoft and Alaska Airlines, I was realizing that even though Scrum Masters and product owners might have certifications, they weren't getting leadership training. I was seeing a
Hmm.
lot of gaps in how they communicated.
Hmm.
Remote Scrum Study website itself is devoted to delivering Agile certification classes. But beyond that, I've created a place for Agile practitioners to band together to learn from each other. And
Hmm.
that's my focus is leadership training. I also have a YouTube channel, which I'll talk about a little bit later, where I'm teaching those leadership skills. So it's a combination, let's say, of these three elements that I want to have agile practitioners follow so that they are regarded as more valuable and also can keep their jobs and be happy doing that.
A lot of companies say that they're agile, right? But in your experience, right? So what are they actually getting wrong?
Well, the most common reason is also at the heart of the methodology, and that's the fact that they're not listening to the developers. And on the other side of the question, the developers don't always feel empowered to speak up. And that leaves both sides frustrated. The
Hmm.
leaders don't receive accurate information about the status of the project, and the developers are constantly under pressure to deliver in mostly unreasonable circumstances. Agile is intended to provide the developers the right to speak up and say, this is not feasible, or this is not feasible in the given time, or we have a better idea on how to construct this feature.
Yeah.
So, by listening to the developers who are not automatons, they're creative people, you're more likely to get a well thought out solution and a more elegant result.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. So, what are the early signs that team is using agile vocabulary without really understanding the agile thinking?
It's the behavior where they're all doing the ceremonies, but not listening to the developers when they say this isn't going to work.
Mm.
If your company is still acting like anything that comes from the top must be done without question, you're still living in a waterfall environment. Waterfall was created about 30 years before Agile, and it was really designed for physical projects like construction and
I see.
manufacturing.
Hmm.
So, software development is a creative endeavor done by
Yes.
developer experts. We don't require software company developers, I'm sorry, software company leaders to be developers.
Mm.
So they may be asking for more than a team can deliver in a specified period of time. Now that doesn't make those requests invalid. It just there needs to be a negotiation of features, schedules, delivery, and the developers need to be treated as an equal partner in
Hmm.
those discussions.
Yeah. Can you give us some like a real life kind of example? How does it look like in real life?
Yes. I was working at a large enterprise where um, they were behaving like agilists, but they had some closet waterfall people there. And
Yes. Yes. I
when,
can relate. Yeah.
yeah, when the schedule started to slip,
Yeah.
um, the project manager, of course, started to investigate, asked a bunch of questions. They went through a whole series of negotiations, and they came back with a schedule that was literally going to be a year longer than what was projected.
Okay. Well.
And so I felt the need to escalate. Unfortunately, I escalated to one of those closet waterfall people.
Mhm.
And they immediately tried to push back, saying, okay, we're not going to do agile anymore. This needs an agile, this needs to waterfall touch.
Oh,
The project ended up getting canceled completely because the estimates given by the developers were accurate.
I
There
see.
was just no way they could possibly, even if they threw more people at it, there was just no way that it was going to get done in the time that the company wanted, which is unfortunate because as I learned later, the original estimate was the same one they came up with the second time. It was a 2-year project they wanted done in 1 year.
Oh, I see. Okay. Cool. Thanks for the example. Why do so many teams still struggle with struggle with misalignment, friction, and resentment, even though everyone thinks they are following the same process?
Well, there are three main reasons for the kind of friction you're describing. The first one is expectations.
Hmm.
Stakeholders and project managers expect the software to be delivered within a specified period of time
Hmm.
with the predetermined features. Developers may not be able to deliver as requested, but they also don't feel like they can speak up and say no. Project managers and I'm sorry, scrum masters and product owners try to keep the software on track, but they're usually not the managers of the people, the developers, and can only lead by influence rather than authority. So that's one point of friction. Another one is a point of resentment that I've seen is the difference in the level of understanding of what Agile really is. Now, Agile's
Mm.
been around for 25 years, and software
Yes.
development teams are expected to know and follow that methodology. But I have yet to be on a project where there's been a spot check
Yeah.
on what we all mean by Agile, unless I'm the one who insists on it.
Yeah. I see.
Um, I, I developed a training deck. I got everybody to agree, that we're all talking about the same thing. And I kept having to remind people for the rest of my tenure on that particular project. So that's two. The third one is different levels of expertise among the developers themselves. So you have the more seasoned developers who resent having to meet every day for stand up.
Mhm.
You've seen junior developers who don't feel comfortable with the speed at which things are going. I've seen highly refined long-term development teams move to Kanban instead, which is a simpler methodology than Scrum, because there was already internal trust,
I
uh,
see.
good communication, quality coding. I once went head to head with a delivery manager over the use of Scrum versus Kanban because he wanted to use Kanban with a
Mhm.
newly formed team that was still struggling. And the result was not pretty. They continued to struggle and he continued to be frustrated. You really have to look at the synergy of the team, the whether they have similar levels of expertise, and if you've got someone who needs help, they need to be invested in, or as what happens more often is that contractors are dropped off because they can't keep up with the rest of the team. So those are the three main things that I think cause this
Awesome.
kind of angst.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. I think this get more complicated as you bring more remote in the picture, right? So, how should leaders think differently managing remote teaming if they actually want the trust, accountability, and the good delivery?
Oh, I just finished a YouTube video on the subject. You can
Awesome.
find it at youtube.com/@Thule M. Remote work is a secondary area of expertise, and I plan on doing a lot more videos on the subject. But to answer your question, the big one is trust. And that
Mm.
comes from communication and transparency between the leadership and those creating the product. It's not that being remote requires more communication and transparency than being on site. It's that it requires a little more effort to keep the information flowing. And that goes both
Mm.
ways.
Mhm.
Even though we use email daily,
Yeah.
there are specific things that leaders can do to be clearer. examples include one topic per email, so that the subsequent threads are still discussing only the one thing.
Mm.
It's so tempting to put a whole bunch of things in one email to save time, and then you've got people answering, different parts of the question. It's really hard to follow. There was one company I worked with, it was just horrible. They constantly, it was like the kitchen sink emails. Oh, here it comes again, kind of thing. But this is a two-way street. I mean, software developers have to create, they're both creative and precise in what they're doing. And I know that most of them really, 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 really need uninterrupted time to do what they're doing. And it's
Mm.
part of the reason why some developers resort to working late at night or early
Mm.
in the morning, just so they won't get interrupted.
True. Yeah.
Now, when you're working remotely as a developer, you have to respond to people when they need the information. So, one of the things remote teams need to establish is how they're going to communicate and when. Now, in the
Mm.
last 10 years or so, that's been handled asynchronously using chat programs like Slack, Discord, Azure DevOps, for example. Um, those who need answers to a question can type a question in the chat and leave it for when the developer comes up for error or takes a break, at which
Mm.
time they can answer. If the request is urgent and the time frame is short, developers will reluctantly agree to accept text messages to get their attention, but most teams don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
So I would say, to conclude, focus on a single message at a time, set expectations. There's that word again, and on turnaround times for responses.
Yeah.
Um, there are other ways to improve. We don't have time in the podcast to cover those, so I'll be doing
Yeah,
videos.
but I think this is very interesting actually. This is very also practical tips about one topic, one email. That's really good actually. Yeah,
You'd think
I'm
we'd
gonna.
know that by now. Yeah. Oh my
Yes, I
goodness.
do. You see a lot of enterprise environment, right? So what makes a good workplace? What makes a workplace become toxic from a process or leadership standpoint?
Well, I alluded to the difference in developer skills per team a little bit earlier. Having to work with people who are unable to complete the work due to poor skills creates a lot of work for the rest of the team, as well as a lot of resentment.
Mm.
Um, if the company is unwilling to invest in improving skills, then the toxicity just keeps growing. Um, the uncertainty about skill levels is one of the reasons why many developers start out as contractors until they prove themselves. Another source of angst that you don't really think about is territorialism, and that's
Mm.
among the leadership. Now, I've seen this a lot when long-time entrenched employees feel really threatened by the new person who has great ideas. They will come on and change everything. Um,
Yes.
one way this manifests is in the lack of clear inter-team processes. So, one of the tactics I use when I arrive on a new assignment is to diagram the
Mm.
interdependence of my teams with other teams in the other enterprise. So if we use a database backend, I want to know what the database is, who my
Mm.
contact should be, and how the information flows. Um, I find out who to ask for clarification, and then I invite them to help me fill out the diagram.
Mm.
Uh, I, I did this once with a diagram of I did a diagram of team dynamics in a big company and discovered there were several branches where the mid-level managers were competing with each other.
Mhm.
They were claiming the same responsibilities, and that contact confessed to me that it was unclear who was going to win the battle. It was probably not a good idea to ask. And apparently their boss was either unwilling or unaware and what didn't step in. And it's those kinds of internal struggles that keep people from
Got it.
putting forth their best.
So I assume you're going to share the diagram with the team, correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It I used to use Miro. That was the
Yes.
easiest way to do, between the diagrams and the yellow stickies. You'd be surprised how often there were conflicting understandings of who was going to do what. And I didn't get to finish that one, um, because I ran into that obstacle. But it was well worth the effort because it's shown a light for everyone else to see too.
Hmm.
Well, it's usually the lack of communication, the different expectations. That's the biggest thing.
I see.
Um, and it builds up over time for all the reasons that I've stated. So,
Okay, cool. And so with the job market changing and the role getting blurred, so what does Scrum Master and product and owners, project managers need to do now to stay valuable?
mm. This blurring of roles tells me that my mission to make the case for the value of Agile is the right one. I probably receive 20 to 30 job descriptions a week,
Mm,
and half of those are describing a mixture of project management and Agile as job requirements. This is a tough situation. I mean, job candidates spend years perfecting their skills only to be asked to do a mixture of activities. And until tech hiring opens back up, Scrum Masters and product owners are going to have to educate on the value of Agile, not only during interviews, but also on their personal profile websites. If you don't
mm,
have one, that's the first thing to do is set one up that you can refer to. And recruiters, for example, appreciate that because they'll get a chance to understand who you are.
mm,
Uh, Getting certified in the appropriate Agile role helps.
mhm,
You can point to it as evidence that you've done your homework. That's in addition, of course, to the work experience that you have. In the job descriptions that I've seen, it's more common to see project managers be asked to do Agile ceremonies as if that's the only thing there is to Agile. Um, Being able to promote Agile leadership as part of a project manager's job is a real context switching. I mean, being a PM is more about keeping everyone on schedule, whereas being a product owner or a scrum master, those folks are directly involved with the production of the software. So the latter are leaders of people leading by influence. So, in short, I would say you've got extra work to do to help the people hiring understand what you do.
mm.
And I'll do what I can to help from my side.
So actually, I had a follow-up question, but I think I got the answer. But if you can repeat, so what skill matter more now than they used to?
Well, I still think it's the leadership aspect of whatever you do. I mean, project managers still need to be leaders too. They need to be able to stand up to the stakeholders and say, "This is the way it is. This is what we can do. This is what we can't do." And I don't see that kind of training in project management certification either. And I think this is belies some of the attitudes towards the leadership of these large companies, that the expectation is still there, and it may be pressure on them too,
Mm,
that they have to deliver regardless of what it takes, whether it's throwing more people at it or you know spending more money. I don't know. The money pressure is so great that a lot of people don't feel like they can, especially right now, don't feel like they can push back against that lest they lose their own jobs. So there's a lot of intimidation that I think is present in various forms, that is really putting pressure on being able to get a job and keep a job, frankly.
cool, cool, got it. So let's talk about a little about AI impact right now. So where do you think AI can generally help teams work better? Where do you think people are overestimating it?
I've had some hands-on experience with this, so I feel like I have clarity about what this means. AI, as it stands now, is a tool. It's
Yes.
intended, you can use it to shorten your tasks,
Mm,
to deliver research information, but it is not a valid standalone design tool. You're still going to want humans to provide the overall design of what you're doing. Then you can
mm,
ask AI to provide suggestions based on the
mm.
data it has collected. AI so far is not sentient. It is delivering information based on what's out there on the internet.
Yes.
And as we know, no one is curating or validating the reality or truth of what's being posted. So there's an inherent risk there. You can count on AI to try to deliver a consensus, but I'll talk about how you get it to do that in a minute.
Mm,
If you're a developer looking for ways to alternate ways to solve a problem. AI can deliver information that's publicly available.
Mhm.
You might find the solution you're looking for. If you want it to feed AI your code and have it suggest test cases, that's a
Mhm.
reasonable use of AI because it can scan faster than you can.
Yeah.
But the key to successful use of AI is to set boundaries, to always be specific in your prompts, and to always require it to cite sources. That way you have a chance to not plagiarize or be led astray by questionable sources. Now, as an example, I'm not a strong developer. I've used ChatGPT a couple of times to create custom reports from both Jira and Azure DevOps.
Mhm.
I've used it to create small utilities for
Mhm.
myself and for other people. In all cases, I had to go back and clarify what I wanted, because, and many times tell ChatGPT it was wrong. For
Mhm.
example, I wanted to pull data directly from YouTube's backend so that I could speed up a search for videos by topic, subscribers, and number of views. And it created the software for me with a few additional refinements.
Mhm.
Then I slammed up against Google's limitations on the number of queries per day, which I
Mhm.
did not know about. Now, it helped me fill out the request for the form by decoding just a horrible user interface. And it said, but even then, it was delivering out of date information. After about 2 hours of trying, we finally got it figured out, and I still had to wait another week to have Chat GPT. I'm sorry, to have Google up the limit so that I could continue using the tool. But that's an example of the difference between relying on it to create something and relying on it as a tool where you are still the one in control. And
Mhm.
I think especially you being the designer, you being the cross checker, you being the one specifying and setting boundaries, that's the attitude at this point in time that I would take towards AI. It's a wonderful tool with limitations only in that you want to be walking the straight and narrow and not stealing other people's stuff. It's that
Mhm.
simple.
Awesome. This is pretty good, that, wrap up question. Before we, so for someone listening right now, right, maybe they are a leader, maybe they are on the product team, maybe they are just trying to influence a messy environment, right? This happens most of the time. So what is the one thing you want them to kind of rethink about start right now?
Remember who's doing the work. Remember who you're relying on to
Mhm.
make to deliver a product, and treat them with respect, and in return they will treat you with respect, and that level of trust that's necessary opens up the communication that you really crave. So if you don't understand, it's okay to say, I don't know, I don't understand, show me, explain to me. And most developers are more than happy to do that. In fact, they'd be thrilled to show you, because it opens up dialogue and it opens up opportunities for them to say, I realize that you're trying to match feature for feature, but what if you also did this? And they're usually full of ideas because they're in the code, they're entrenched in what's being
Yes.
delivered, and they can be a terrific source of ideas if you let them.
Mhm.
So that's the message to leadership. Developers need to understand, and this is a speech I've had more than once, to understand that participation in Agile or any other um, Agile specific methodology involves administration. You have to fill out the job tickets. You need to respond. You need to put the information in there. Every job out there has some percentage of administration, and they need to do that.
Mhm.
So those would be my advice to both sides of the equation, and say Agile can work if you do it correctly, and you can be happy doing Agile.
Awesome. This is super useful, we now with both side can learn something from here, It was great conversation, I really appreciate your perspective. But this go beyond just the process, right? It's just how team function. I know I personally told you, right, working for 15 plus years in the agile, and we got a lot of time wrong, doing it wrong, and they just following that waterfall, right? So I hope
Yeah.
you know it's really about how team function, how leader leads, and how company create a healthy system that works, right? Thanks again for coming to our podcast, Zen. Yeah, thanks for everyone for listening. If this conversation was useful, share it with someone who is thinking about leadership, team performance, and to the future work. And we will also see you in next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.